Welcome in to the CFB Nation All-America podcast, which can be found on the CFB Nation YouTube channel every Wednesday morning during the college football season. I'm Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, and I'm joined by Bill Bender, senior writer here at sportingnews.com. Together, we will bridge the gap between Saturdays and give you the college football content you need each week during the season. Bill, say hello to the good folks here at CFB Nation and tell them what they'll be getting each week.
Yeah, and we wore the same outfit. We have the same name, the same kind of the same face, kind of the same clothes. We're gonna have to figure that out a little bit, Bill. And are we gonna go by Trocchi and Bender? I don't know. That's kind of what they do at Sporting News. But no, this is my, let's say, 9th year on the beat at Sporting News, maybe 10 in college football, and we've worked together for a few years. We have strong opinions on college football, good cross section of SEC, Big Ten, and really the whole country knowledge. And we're going to give this a try. So if you listen to us, I guarantee you'll be entertained. You'll be informed, and you'll be ready to go like we are for week one.
All right, today's show, we're going to talk about some transfer QBs, Notre Dame, and its relationship with the Big Ten. Bill Bender's got some spicy thoughts on that one. And then we're going to unveil our confidence contest, where the two Bills will go head-to-head in a bowl-style confidence pool each week to get you ready for the weekend. So section one, we're going to talk about transfer QBs. We had a fun transfer QB quiz on sportingnews.com this morning. I hope you took it, Bill. I hope you went 9 for 9 as well. But so as you look at, just the free agency aspect of the transfer portal, and it certainly has hit the quarterback position as hard or harder than any other position. What do you see when you think about all the transfer QBs heading into this year? And then is there a guy who you think is just, going to stand out at the end of the year when we have a list of the top 10 QB performers this year who were transfers, who's going to be near or at the top of that list?
Well, when you're one of the striking things about it is if you look at the 65 Power 5 teams, more than 20 are going to have a first-year starter that was a transfer quarterback. That's a third of the Power 5 teams. And they're not just, their names ranging from Caleb Williams, who I'm sure we'll talk about, and Spencer Rattler, who was a 5-star quarterback with a huge background, to guys that have been around the game forever. And the transfer quarterback I kind of like, the more I think about it, and it might make some people scoff, is I like the setup that Adrian Martinez has at Kansas State, believe it or not. I know he's turnover prone. I know he was in Nebraska forever. I know there was a tendency to make the big play, then turn around and throw one of those interceptions that made you shake your head. But I also know you're dealing with a good setup in terms of this was a team that had a +5 turnover ratio last year, which was up on the top half of the country. They have Colin Klein at offensive coordinator. And those who remember Colin Klein, what did he do? He ran the football. He didn't turn the ball over. And he did that all the way to New York as a Heisman finalist. Now, I'm not saying Adrian Martinez will be that, but I think he could surprise on a team that's bound to surprise there in Kansas State and Manhattan this year.
Yeah, you're right. I think 6 top 25 teams are going to be starting transfer quarterbacks. One of them it's going to be Oklahoma, and Dylan Gabriel will be there, guys, coming in from UCF, reuniting with his offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby. I think he's going to be in a good position to succeed. I think Oklahoma is still, probably the most talented team in the Big 12. Baylor might be the pick that people are leaning towards, but I still think, Gabriel came in, thought about transferring to UCLA for a few weeks, then saw the opening at Oklahoma, saw a clear path to being the starter. A fair number of these transfers have had to win the job in the spring or still in battles in fall camp. Gabriel came in, won the job right away in the spring. There's been no chance. So I think his path for success looks pretty good for someone who, like I said, he missed, I think, the last 9 games or 8 games last year at UCF after he got hurt. He's in position to really be kind of a bounce back, not necessarily from performance, but from an injury perspective.
Super efficient quarterback. You're right, Bill. And I think in that offense with the skill position talent around him and some familiarity, obviously, with Josh Heupel, who's loosely tied to Oklahoma as well. I'm sure that was a recommendation in there at some point. So, yeah, I mean, when you're at the controls end of an offense like that, Dylan Gabriel, not only, I mean, Oklahoma quarterbacks get to New York. So it wouldn't be a surprise to me if he did, as long as he stays healthy in that offense.
Is there a QB you're a little bit worried about? Maybe you're not sure the path they took, the decision they made, that it's going to turn out strong for them this year?
Well, you and I talked about this a lot, that there were guys that transferred that had starting jobs at Power 5 places, and they still transferred where they were in maybe less of a chance to start, which was peculiar. I mean, not a Charlie Brewer type situation, obviously, but there are a couple like that. One guy that's obviously going to get a lot of attention that we're going to be watching very closely all year is Quinn Ewers. So I'm not saying Quinn Ewers is going to struggle right off the bat. I think one of the things to keep in mind, we have not seen him throw a pass at the collegiate level. We've seen him get an NIL deal. We've seen him go to Ohio State. We've seen him transfer to Texas. We've seen him help bring Arch Manning to Texas. And we've seen everybody project his future without him throwing a pass, which, I went back, looked at Sam Ehlinger, for example. If you go on his bio, it says he was 23-6 when he was healthy throughout the game, which is a pretty good career for a starting quarterback. But in those 4 years that Ehlinger was on campus, Texas was 32-18. So it's just a case to me that no matter what Quinn Ewers does this year, the expectations are always going to be too high. If he goes out and plays really well against Alabama and they lose, people are still going to expect more out of Quinn Ewers. And it can't be an easy job knowing that Arch Manning's going to be coming soon. So I think he's just in an impossible situation to please.
Yeah, I was going to say, when are you going to start talking about Arch Manning, figuratively breathing down his neck right off the bat before he even throws a pass again? So, yeah, you're right. He's in a tough spot. But if you believe, all of the analysts who have seen him at these camps and everything like that, he is ready to live up to the hype, and he has got the talent. He's got the Trevor Lawrence level talent, and he could be able to do it. I'm looking at a guy like Indiana's Michael Penix, who transferred to Washington, didn't have a clear path to the starting job, is still battling Dylan Morris and Sam Heward. Morris started all last year for almost the whole season. Heward's a 5-star. He's a legacy. So it's a crowded quarterback room. I loved Penix during that pandemic season. Of course, he's had so many injuries. It's too bad that he hasn't been able to stay on the field and stay healthy, because he could be electrifying at times. But I kind of think maybe he looks at the group of 5 level for this season, where he's got a clear path, where he's got an opportunity to join maybe an upper third team in a conference versus Washington, who was 4-8 last year. They're picked middle of the conference, probably best case scenario. They've got 9 conference games. They got Michigan State this year. I don't know. I don't know that he's in the best situation. He's
got to stay healthy, and you said it. There's 3 viable quarterbacks in that situation, not to mention a new coach. So that I don't even want to call it lightning in a bottle with Penix at Indiana. He was amazing that year. I mean, he really vaulted that team to be the second best team in the Big Ten. And you want him to do well there. Obviously, though, he's that guy that we were just talking about that had a starting job, that had a little trouble with injuries, and then he goes somewhere where, Ford's a guy that obviously there is a legacy there. They want to see him play, and Morse played well in spots last year. So with Kalen DeBoer, I guess it's all bets are off in terms of who's going to start there.
Let's talk about the 2 Oklahoma starting quarterbacks who both technically went to USC schools, with a USC out on the West Coast and a USC in the East Coast. Who do you like to have a better season this year, Caleb Williams or Spencer Rattler?
Caleb Williams, just because the Pac-12 is going to be set up for him to be more successful. I mean, when you look what they got him Oregon's leading rusher. They got him Jordan Addison, who's a first-round NFL receiver who I think they'll form an immediate connection and do very well. They got him Lincoln Riley's play calling, which has been brilliant. And when Caleb Williams, you're looking at a guy that had 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, incredible playmaking ability. I mean, I look at him and I see a future number 1 pick because he does the things that NFL quarterbacks do. And we saw that in spots. There were ups and downs last year. I'm not saying Spencer Rattler's not going to play well. I actually like him at South Carolina too with Shane Beamer. I think he will show attributes that NFL scouts are going to like against a tougher schedule. It's different going up against TCU than it is on the road at Arkansas. Or, they played Georgia early in the year. So I actually think Spencer Rattler is a guy that could probably go 8-4 as a starter this year and be better off for it when he gets to the NFL. So very interesting question there. And I know there's a lot of USC quarterbacks that have went out and a lot that have come in and moved around. But I do like Caleb Williams' potential in that offense. And, there's a reason he's listed right behind Stroud and Bryce Young in a lot of those Heisman discussions.
Yeah, you talked to Rattler in the spring. He joins a team that overachieved a little bit last year, but had nothing at quarterback. I mean, they literally started a graduate assistant at quarterback at one point. So he fills a huge need. You talk about a guy who had a clear path to the starting job. He comes in to a team that's, Beamer is rebuilding nicely. They had a huge hole at quarterback. Rattler is filling it. Out at USC, they still have big problems on both offensive line, defensive line. You mentioned the skill players they have. You just got to hope for Williams' sake, he's standing upright and he can, be able to throw the ball before he gets hit, use these skill players, and, USC can produce the kind of offense that on paper, at least with these skill guys,
right,
that they will be able to do. All right, so let's talk section 2 here at CFB Nation All-American Podcast. Notre Dame and the Big Ten. Bill Bender, you had an interesting take at sportingnews.com last week about Notre Dame and the Big Ten. The Big Ten should withdraw its essentially open invitation to join the conference and to stop playing Notre Dame as a non-conference opponent in football. We're talking, of course. Why do you feel that way?
Well, I mean, no, let's start before we even get to that. Let's start with a few things here. Like when I wrote that column, the Notre Dame fans and, our good friend Brian Driscoll at Irish Breakdown, he likes to get on me about this stuff. But here's the deal. I'm a 12-year Catholic school kid, grew up in Ohio. I'm drinking, like if you look, this is a Notre Dame glass that I got. It's look how old that is. And I drink water out of it. So I don't want to hear this that I'm a Notre Dame hater by any means. I got that trip to South Bend and it's one of my best water cups. So I literally drink out of the cup of Notre Dame fandom, whatever you want to say, but
the holy water right there.
But yeah, I get to see this from, one of the things with my background, I like to pride myself, Notre Dame, High State in that area, know a lot about Michigan. And those are the 3 programs I probably write about most and understand most. So what I don't understand is why Notre Dame continues to cling on to independence. And that's kind of what, from their angle, this whole TV deal, I understand it from Notre Dame's angle. I wouldn't not do what they do. You give me my own network, my own 5-game arrangement with the ACC, my own scheduling, my own money, fine. But you can't tell me that they don't fit in the Big Ten. They play hockey there. You can't tell me that any of those ACC games are better than Michigan, Notre Dame. They're not. And I don't know why the Big Ten continues to give them that open invitation when they've been turned down time after time after time. And I know the history behind it. It's not like I don't know why Notre Dame has this weird relationship with the Big Ten. So, like I said, I'm not being an Irish hater, but if from the Big Ten standpoint, I'd be like, all right, dude, we've tried this many times. When we go to 20 and the SEC goes to 20, you're not going to be a part of it.
But don't you think shutting off Notre Dame as a non-conference opponent hurts the Big Ten?
I mean, no. Yes and no. I mean, from a rating standpoint, yeah. NBC is going to make them play nice, so to speak. If there's this Big Ten / Notre Dame Saturday, I get it. They already have that on the schedule. They have Purdue. They have they have Michigan. They have Michigan State. They have all those games. But what I don't understand from the Notre Dame angle sometimes is that there's this notion that they're above the Big Ten. I think that's how people feel in Penn State and Columbus and Michigan. That why did Michigan or Notre Dame and Michigan break that relationship off? Why is it that I've lived in Ohio most of my life and they've played one? This is only the second home and home that they've played in 43 years. That's absurd to me when you're dealing with what, in my estimation, could be one of the best rivalries in college football with Ohio State and Notre Dame, especially with Marcus Freeman there. So, and here's something I'd like to point out is I did some research, and so Notre Dame all time against the Big Ten, 209, 106, and 14. You look at that, you're like, yeah, if you're a Notre Dame fan, yeah, we're super better than the Big Ten, go Irish. But if you look at since the BCS era, which is about the last 25 years of modern football, they're 33 and 27. That's not that great. And if you take away Purdue, who they're 14 and 4 against, that goes down to 19 and 23. And I know you're going to give me trivia in a little bit, but Bill, here's my trivia for you.
Oh boy.
Who are the only Big Ten schools that Notre Dame has a losing record against all time?
Ohio State.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Michigan.
And Michigan. There you go. So there you go. That's where all this angst is. It's why can't Notre Dame be in that same room with Michigan and Ohio State? Share the power. Create a ridiculous conference with USC and maybe Stanford if they add in. I think all of it adds up that I think some Notre Dame fans, not all, have to at least look at that plan from the Big Ten and say, yeah, I'd want a piece of that if it comes to that. Why wouldn't they?
Well, I mean, as has been said a million times, Notre Dame values its independence. If they can make the financials work, which it looks like they're going to be able to, and they have a clear path to the national championship in terms of playoff participation, they're going to choose independence every time. And it's not easy to go about it as an independent. So you got to give them credit for being able to figure out how to make it work. And I think people do get tired of it's the exception that Notre Dame has, it's 5 conference champions and Notre Dame and Notre Dame and Notre Dame. It always has to be and Notre Dame. But they've sort of earned their spot in the college football landscape by making a go of it. I mean, a lot, like 30 years ago, however many years ago, there was lots of independent teams. And then a bunch of them joined the Big East, and then the Big East collapsed. And then Miami went to the ACC, and it's like, Penn State used to be independent. Like there used to be a lot of independents. Now there's basically one standing, or BYU 2. There's 2 standing, and they've worked hard to make it work. And I think it's still going to keep working for them. And, they just enjoy the fact that they can have these fun 2-game home series like they did with Georgia a couple years ago. They've got Alabama on the schedule, I think 29 and 30 or something like that. They've got a few fun ones coming up. They've got, Michigan State and Michigan are in the next 10, 15 years. They got a Texas A&M. They've got Florida will be fun. They've got a one-off with Arkansas. I think the home and home part of that might have died in the pandemic. Right. They got a back half of a Wisconsin neutral site that's going to be fun. I mean, that's just been part of their allure to have the flexibility to have these, 2-game, like I said, the home and home things in addition to their staples. And if they join the Big Ten, maybe those go away.
Well, but that's my point. Like, which ones have the most history tied to them? Like, I was arguing, one of my buddies is a huge Notre Dame fan, and he was trying to tell me that Notre Dame is prime time against everybody. Like, I've watched some bad Notre Dame Florida State primetime games. And let's be honest about it. The Notre Dame USC rivalry in recent seasons, not that great. I think the potential for it to be really awesome with Lincoln Riley and Marcus Freeman, yeah, that's there. But there was a couple years ago where I forgot USC and Notre Dame was on. Being honest, I mean, I forgot they were on. And I'm like, and that wasn't on Notre Dame's end. That was on the other end of it, to be fair. That was USC's fault. But, what rivalry has more history than Michigan Notre Dame or Michigan State Notre Dame? That has angst back to 1966. Purdue Notre Dame, that's very important. And I will contend that in this modern era, going into whatever the next chapter of college football is, that Ohio State Notre Dame has the potential to be the best game in college football if they play it on a regular basis. You can't tell me otherwise. Not with the Marcus Freeman tie, not with what Ohio State's been the dominant power in the Midwest in the 21st century. 20th century Notre Dame, that's fine. 21st century Ohio State. There's actually a time right now where they're going to be quote unquote right at the same time. Because when they played in the 90s, and that's going to get brought up a lot in the next 10 days, Notre Dame wasn't quite what Ohio State was when they played. And I'm not making excuses, but Ohio State was Eddie George and Orlando Pace and those guys, and Notre Dame was coming out of the back end of the Holtz era. This is the first time, maybe in a year or two, where they're both going to be recruiting at a ridiculous level. It could be the North's version of Georgia, Alabama, and I just don't understand why somebody would say no to that and cite independence. And I know I'm right because I'm right.
This series reminds me of, I think I told you the Notre Dame Georgia series of a couple years ago, where it was two, and it reminds me of what it was in the Notre Dame Ohio State in the 90s, like 2 top 5, top 10. Notre Dame hadn't quite crested, or actually was coming down off the Holtz sort of, the peak of the Holtz years, and they were on the back end, like you said. Notre Dame was still kind of on the rise. Georgia was sort of already up there. Georgia won both those games. Ohio State won both the games in the 90s. But it's interesting to see Notre Dame recruiting at a level that Ohio State has been recruiting at now. And you're right, in the next 5 years, this has the potential to be a terrific game. Now, one thing, you mentioned Brian Driscoll, Irish Breakdown, by the way. Any Notre Dame fan who wants to get in the weeds with Notre Dame, you've got to subscribe to Irish Breakdown. Those guys are, walking encyclopedias for the last 30 years, 40 years of Notre Dame football. It's amazing stuff. He brought up something that I hadn't heard anywhere else that I thought was interesting was, and I think I told you, if the ACC contract breaks down and things sort of, Florida State and Miami and Clemson all find new homes and things like that, could you imagine a ACC style agreement between Notre Dame and the Big Ten, where Notre Dame plays 5 Big Ten teams a year, leaves 7 games on their own slate as an independent, rotates through 5 at a time, or however they do it with the ACC, and they're able to maintain independence but still have more Notre Dame Penn State games and more Notre Dame Michigan games and more Notre Dame Wisconsin games. What would you, and join the Big Ten for all the other sports that are, more, it would be more local as far as travel and things like that. What would the Big Ten say to that concept?
Probably that, yeah, we can't imagine that because we watched it in September from the time I was in 3rd grade till, Notre Dame stopped doing those things. So if I would, like I said, if I was Kevin Warren, I would take a hard line and say, we're not doing a half membership. I get why they do it with the ACC. I do. And it's beyond a football discussion. It has elevated the basketball program. And I'm a big college basketball guy. I love watching Notre Dame and Mike Bray. He's one of the best. And, they had a couple Elite 8 appearances right away. So it elevated them, and it's elevated their women's basketball program. You watch them when you play those games. So, but I wouldn't let them have a half arrangement. I said, we're either married or we're not. I mean, that's what I would do if Kevin Warren, and I get it but again, I think they're going to get that organically anyway, because if they're both playing with NBC, essentially, NBC is going to push that. We want Notre Dame versus Purdue. We want Notre Dame versus Michigan, and they'll still be great games because of the regionality of it. But at the end of the day, can you picture a Big Ten championship game in 2028 or 2029? And if you're a Notre Dame fan and you really want to piss off everybody else in the conference, Notre Dame versus USC for the Big Ten championship. The winner goes to play Alabama. I mean, that is the ultimate troll if you're the Irish, more so than not joining the conference, in my opinion.
Well, it's interesting. We just watched all summer long that, the last couple of years, everyone in college football is out for themselves. What's good. And everybody is, they're driven by self-interest. And the Big Ten is what's best for the Big Ten is keeping a good relationship with Notre Dame. What's best for Notre Dame, keeping a good relationship with the Big Ten. They don't necessarily have to get married for both of them to be happy. And that's why I think, I don't think that they would ever pull out completely and tell them we don't want to play you anymore or anything like that. And like you said, I think you told me there's some escalators in this contract to allow for Notre Dame to join.
Yeah, and the SBJ had those, and that just tells me that the flirtation will never end. I kind of chuckled when I read that New York Times article from 1999 when Jim Delaney said, we will not invite Notre Dame again. That didn't happen. We heard the Notre Dame chancellor at the time of affairs at the time say, we'd rather be one of one than one of 12. Well, that stayed the same. And Notre Dame has got by. And they have, to their credit, again, great athletic director, forward-thinking guy in Jack Swarbrick, able to do these things and get them included in the playoff and making sure that they are still, one of the things I will say is it drives me crazy when people say Notre Dame's irrelevant, because they're not. They've had 5 straight 10-win seasons. Brian Kelly has pushed them into the bridge. I call them the bridge, and we talked about this last week, where Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia are the cream. Clemson's next, and then it's Notre Dame. And that's Marcus Freeman's job, is to recruit at a level that we don't hear the same press conference when they play at Georgia or in Alabama, or honestly, when they play Ohio State here in a few weeks. What are you going to hear? We didn't have enough on the perimeter. We didn't have enough speed on the perimeter, those kind of things. And I think Marcus Freeman's going to change that just in time for their Big Ten opener when they join the Big Ten. So that and I think it's a fair argument both ways.
Great. Okay. All right, Bill. Let's move on. That was good talk, good discussion. I'm going to hit you with my trivia question. Then we will go into our confidence contest. Do not answer the question yet. I want you thinking about it. I want you distracted while you're making your picks. Okay. So I can take advantage here. Trivia question. We were talking about transfer QBs. We're talking about week 0, the games that we're going to pick and things like that. I'm going to go back to last year, where it was Illinois playing Nebraska. Okay. Illinois starting quarterback transferred in from Michigan, Brandon Peters, got hurt in the second quarter against Nebraska. Who came in when Brandon Peters went down in the second quarter against Nebraska? Don't answer that. Don't look it up. But I will give you a chance at the end of the show. I thought it was a challenging question. I think you should get it. You think you'll probably get it, but want you mulling it over. Okay, so confidence contest. Here are the rules that we're going to follow this year. There's tons of podcasts out there that go through games, set up games, do a great job of analyzing the spread and things like that. On a normal week, we'll take 5 games. Week 0, we'll take 3 games. We're going to pick games against the spread. And not only will we pick them against the spread, we will assign a confidence value to them. 1 to 5, 1 to 3 this week. 1 to 5, 5 points. If you get it right, you get 5 points. You number 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, 1 point. So, even if you go 2 and 3, if you hit your top 2 scores, you'll get 9 points, things like that. So we will, you can pick any game, doesn't have to be top 25 game. And we will go. So let's go through the week 0 picks. All right. For this Saturday. Bill, why don't you give me your 3-pointer? I'll give a 3-pointer. Then you go 2, I go 2, you go 1, I go 1. So what's your 3-pointer pick? You did some picks at sportingnews.com that we'll have later in the week. People can read them there, but people who want a sneak preview, let's hear it right now. 3-pointer from Bill Bender.
I got Nevada -9 against New Mexico State. I know they lost Carson Strong. I know they lost soon-to-be NFL Rookie of the Year, Green Bay Packers receiver Romeo Doubs. I know they've lost, new coach, those kind of things.
Lost their coach.
Yeah, that too. But other than that, you look at this team. I talked about turnovers last year. They didn't turn the ball over much. They beat New Mexico State by 28. I think they run the ball a lot in this game. I think it's one of those games where you're going to see that matter. And with a new coach, they'll settle in around Toa Tawa. Leading rusher last year, averaged about 5 yards a carry. And that 9, if it was 10.5, I might not do it. But pretty confident in the Wolfpack here. They get a win.
So I got to root against Nevada right away. All right, I got it. I'm writing these down. Okay, I'm rooting against Nevada. My 3-pointer, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, which I know you don't agree with. Dublin, 12:30 kickoff, Fox on Saturday. I'm taking Nebraska to cover the 6.5 points against Northwestern. Last year, Nebraska beat Northwestern 56-7. They gained 657 yards against them. Got a new quarterback in Casey Thompson, who started 10 games last year for Texas, threw for a Big 12 high, 24 touchdowns coming in. Northwestern, I don't see them improving as much as they need to make this game competitive. They were, this is 2 3-9 teams. Both teams went 1-8 in the conference. But Northwestern finished 14th in the league in scoring and 12th in the league in points allowed. Nebraska finished 6th in scoring and 8th in points allowed. I just like the Huskers to do it again to them, overseas on 12:30. And boy, I can't wait to watch that game.
So do I do my comeback now? Because it's on mine too.
If it's your 2-pointer, go for it. If you want to save it for your 1-pointer, do that.
I can save it or I can come back. But so we'll save that for my 1-pointer, obviously, and then I can give you the full response back. Okay. My 2-pointer is UTEP. UTEP over North Texas in a pick'em. Pick'em games are already tough they're tough to pick. But the fact that this is a pretty big Conference USA game out of the chute. And North Texas beat them 20-17 last year. It was a field goal with 7 seconds left. It was a game where, UTEP had a hot start and then they didn't really get it going, but they have Gavin Hardison back. The Miners are, this is a program that's been perpetually bad and they're starting to turn a corner a little bit. Anytime I have a pick 'em this early in the season, I'm going to go with the home team, especially if they're going to do that. So it's a toss up. Might actually end up being the best game of the week. If you're really into college football, you will sit and watch UTEP in North Texas and enjoy it. I think the fourth quarter is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't know that it's on. I looked at the ESPN schedule, and that is the one game that doesn't have TV information. So I'm not sure. Probably can find it streaming somewhere. I don't know. My 2-pointer, Vanderbilt covering
of
the
course.
6.5 over Hawaii. Another one you don't like. 2 points for me. Hawaii, not in good shape. Tumultuous off season. Todd Grantham's departure was a mess. They thought about hiring June Jones. That was a mess. Timmy Chang comes in, first-time head coach. They are rebuilding Aloha Stadium, so they are playing on campus in a 9,000-seat, essentially high school setting. There's a track around the field. I mean, it really looks like a high school field. So it's Vanderbilt's got at least a second-year coach. They did not have a great season under Clark Lee. There's no question about it. They had a very bad opener last year. Hopefully that caught their attention. I think, the roster isn't ready to compete in the SEC, but I think it's ready to compete out at Hawaii. Hawaii is a 12.5-point underdog in week 1 at home against Western Kentucky, who lost their, record-setting QB. So I don't think the bettors think much of Hawaii. There's good reason to think, to doubt Vanderbilt. I like their quarterback, Mike Wright. I think he's, the problem is they don't have much of an offensive line this year, but I like Vanderbilt to at least cover 6.5. I think they can do that. That's 10:30 game on CBS Sports Network for the true diehards like you and I. And that will be, that's my 2-pointer. It's going to be Vandy 6.5 at Hawaii.
I didn't touch it. I think Vandy is going to win, but when you have a mix of everything you just said with the different stadium, Vandy's bad offense, 0.8 points per game last year, Hawaii's bad defense. Yeah, and then a first-time coach in Timmy Chang. It'll be. I think there's going to be a lot of bad in that game, which could lead to a lot of excitement. And if you're up late, you'll watch it. But I think Vandy wins. But with all that mix of that, I'm going to say that Hawaii finds a way to cover. They've played some goofy week 0 games in the past. This could be another one. But I do think the Doors get out with a win. I'll go to my number one, and we talked about this. I like Northwestern to cover. I think I know what happened last year. I know Northwestern or Nebraska ran all over them. It was 56-7. But this series has had a lot of goofiness too. And Northwestern gets Cam Porter back. They're across the pond. They're in Dublin. Northwestern, obviously, one of the things that stands out is that offense has been bad for too long. 93rd or lower in scoring offense the last 4 years. They are going to run the ball, though, in this game, and they're going to do it with Cam Porter and Evan Hall. And, we talk about Nebraska running the ball the last time they played. Well, you got a new offensive coordinator, Mark Whipple. You got a new quarterback in Casey Thompson, and I think they're going to throw it more than people expect this year. It's going to be like Air Husker. And, in this game, I think they can simplify it, but these two teams were 3-9 for a reason last year. There were a lot of things wrong with them. And that's why I think Nebraska gets this win, unlike last year when they lost to Illinois. But I like the Wildcats to cover. That's a big – anytime 13 points on overseas, neutral site, I suppose. Weather could be a factor. You never know. I think Northwestern runs the ball enough, has enough success doing it that they hang around for 4 quarters. And it's an even year. It's an even year. And in the last 2 even years, Pat Fitzgerald has won the Big Ten West. So I'm going to go with that.
I'd rather have a good quarterback than an even year if I'm a Northwestern fan. But, yeah, that's a huge game for us. That's a 4-point swing. I got it as a 3-pointer. You got it as a 1-pointer. My 1-pointer, I agree with you. I'm taking UTEP at home in the Pick'em game, although I actually found him on Vegas Insider as UTEP getting 1. Not that plays a huge factor. But, yeah, North Texas. I looked at that play-by-play from the game last year. UTEP tied the game at 17 with like 40 seconds to go. And North Texas threw a 58-yard pass with 10 seconds left to set up the winning field goal. They basically, I'm guessing they were just getting ready for overtime, and then they just busted one pass and kicked the field goal in the last play of the game. So, yeah, that should be a really fun one. I agree. It's fun to have UTEP. I remember last year the UTEP-UTSA game was like a really big deal for, UTEP's traditionally been a team that's been so down for so long. So, all right, Bill, you got an answer for me. What's the answer to the trivia question? The question was, when Brandon Peters got hurt in week 0 last year against Nebraska, who came in at quarterback for Illinois?
I got the last name. It's Sidkowski. I remember watching the game. I can't remember his first name. And I know this is going to make me look bad because he's battling with Tommy DeVito for the starting job right now, which I think he's going to be the backup when they play Wyoming on Saturday. I want to say Peter Sidkowski.
Artur. It's not Arthur. It's Artur. He's got no H in his name. Artur Sidkowski.
Well, I wouldn't call him by that name anyway. So,
and he also transferred to Illinois. Speaking of transfer QBs, do you know where he transferred from?
What? Who?
No. Sidkowski. Before he came to Illinois, he was at where?
Oh boy, I remember hearing this during the game last year. I want to give me like a half hint.
He's an interesting guy. He went to IMG and like was hyped and committed to Miami, and then I think Miami pulled his scholarship because they didn't offer and they didn't love what they were seeing, and he ended up in the Big Ten.
Rutgers.
You got it.
Yeah. I thought that was it. I mean, I just knew him coming in the game. He played well in that Nebraska game last year. I remember
he played a part in that Penn State crazy game too for Illinois, that 8 overtime game. So
he was stroking. So yeah, he did a great job, and so who knows? But that's week 0 for you. That the funny things you remember. And here's what I always tell people, and it's a good segue as we close out here. Is I remember we went to my son's football game last year, and then I went to Roosters with a buddy, and right when the Nebraska-Illinois game kicked off, I was watching, and I kind of went, and my life is over for the next 15 weeks. And my wife laughed, and my kid even laughed, and we use that inside joke to this day. So when that first game gets kicked off, I'll probably say that, but I say it in a good way. It's fun. We enjoy it. My wife's very understanding about the demands of this job, and she's a big Oklahoma fan, so she's probably right on board with your Dylan Gabriel pick.
This the term football widow came to be for a reason, right?
Yes, it is. But she's ready to go. We're ready to go. It should be a lot of fun.
All right, that's it. Thank you for joining CFB Nation All-America podcast. We will see you next Wednesday.